Hello and welcome to Aston Originals. Today we are talking P&O Ferries. I am joined by Jonathan Finn from Aston Law School. Jonathan, you've never been on the channel before, so if you could introduce yourself, that would be great.
So yeah, I'm a teaching fellow in the Aston Law School, and I am the module leader for the employment law module. So this is very much in my field.
This is a story that has grabbed lots of attention, and considering what's happening in the world at the moment, that's no mean feat, is it, Jonathan? But when you first saw this story break, what were your first thoughts?
My first thoughts were how sudden it was, because ordinarily when a famous company is struggling financially, there's more news in the build up to it. So I suppose, as with most people, what shocked me most was the immediacy of it all.
And it broke in such a strange way, didn't it? Because you had this sort of grainy Zoom video that obviously somebody had shared, and it was the moment that those P&O workers, 800 of them, were told that they were being made redundant, with agency staff set to replace them. Did you smell something fishy pretty much straight away?
Yes, yeah, very much so. Because I think we can split this into two elements, can't we? Really, there's the morals of the whole episode, and then there's the legal side of the whole episode. And I don't think many people are in any doubt at all that from a moral viewpoint, to sack 800 people with half an hour's notice and no consultation via a pre-recorded video it's not great, is it, for PR?
You were doing a webinar with some law students as early as Friday, and the P&O story obviously came up. It was a hot topic. And just tell us a little bit of what you were explaining to them on Friday.
So yeah, they were very keen to ask me about, from the legal side, what the situation was, and so I was explaining that apart from, well, the most notable thing was they described the sackings as redundancies, but my students are well aware that actually for a dismissal to amount to a redundancy means that the person dismissed or made redundant should not be replaced, because it has to be the case that the need for the employer to employ people to carry out that type of work has either disappeared altogether or at least diminished. And so where, as P&O have done with their agency workers, the staff member is replaced, it can't be a redundancy. So that was the immediately interesting thing, that they called it a redundancy. Also, there is a requirement of consultation that was not met if it was a redundancy. And I was saying that actually P&O's bigger worry would probably be unfair dismissal claims coming in. But from the staff's viewpoint, their immediate problem is, yikes, I've been offered this compromise agreement, but the problem is none of us know the detail, and quite rightly, because it's private between the parties of the contract. But that compromise agreement, or severance package, whatever you want to call it, is almost certain to include as a condition, if they sign it, that they waive their right to bring any kind of employment law claim, be it wrongful dismissal, be it unfair dismissal, be it redundancy. And that also, as we saw in the news from Sky, part of it would be it would double up as a non-disclosure agreement. So if they sign it, they're basically gagged, and they lose the right to bring employment law claims. And I would imagine that for people who don't know that much about employment law, that's horrible pressure, and they're probably under pressure to make that decision quite quickly.
And I'll just share that Sky News story with you now.
Right.
Just have a look and that sort of thing. But what we'll do is also just go over that statement. It's my duty to do that. In a statement, the
course.
ferry operator said, "We have made a £100 million a year, £100 million loss year on year, which has been covered by our parent company, DP World. This is not sustainable. Our survival is dependent on making swift and significant changes now. Without these changes, there is no future for P&O Ferries." But this doesn't seem to stack up, does it, Jonathan?
No, because well, it's clear that they're suffering. I'm not. I'm not disputing that they're looking for ways to survive, like most companies are. But the things that to me are suspicious about it are, as I said, it was why was there no build up to this? Normally, if it's a well-known company, there are stories before it's too late. And so I think if they were to try to argue that actually our staff are better off because at least they're getting something, whereas if we'd carried on losing 100, 200 million pounds a year, which was unsustainable, then they might have ended up with nothing. If the company had dare I say sunk. Bit of a and so that's curious. The other thing that's curious is the CEO of P&O Ferries was talking about the need to cut crewing costs by 50%, and yet there was no mention of cuts at a higher level in the company. So that's fairly classic, and that might leave the 800 British crew that were sacked.
It reminds me a little bit of Prince Farquhar from Shrek when he says, "Many people may die, but it's a risk I'm willing to take." And it's almost like, we need to make these cuts, but it's not going to be from my pay packet.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, yeah. I do think there was an element of that. An actual byproduct of this that's very interesting is the whole Brexit debate, because no Dutch staff, no French staff, no Irish staff were dismissed. And so it also raises the whole question of, are UK workers sufficiently protected by UK employment law? Because 800 British staff went, but P&O thought it wise not to dismiss the workers from the countries who are member states of the European Union. So that's another very interesting angle of this whole episode.
Is that an erosion then of workers' rights for the UK? Because I suppose when you say something like take back control, it really does depend who that control goes to. And if it goes to multinational corporations, then workers are probably going to be left in this sort of situation, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. That's very true to say. But I think even when the UK was a member of the European Union, although there is pressure to implement law coming from the European Parliament, I still think even when we were members of the European Union, there's evidence that we arguably didn't go quite as far as we might have done in protecting workers' rights. But certainly, I suspect that with Brexit, I mean, regardless if you're pro-Brexit or against Brexit, I'm not. That's not the purpose of this of this discussion.
That's been and gone, hasn't it?
That's been and gone. That's been and gone. But I think it's fairly clear. There's fairly strong evidence that, as a general rule, if you're a worker in a member state that's a member of the European Union, you will have stronger protection, stronger employment law rights than if you are a worker in a country that's not a member. And obviously, we're no longer a member.
Some people may say, it's a company, and companies have to look after the company's interests. Those higher up it that make those decisions. The need to act quickly, and would expect it's sort of like a collective settlement for breach of the usual employment law procedures as being better all round than some insolvency procedure where there wouldn't be anything or very much for the employees. So does the size of P&O mean that they have got a plan and they're going to stick to it? It will be within the realms of the law. Is this just a case that maybe they didn't expect the backlash to be as brazen as it has been?
Yeah, I think all of the above. I mean, that goes back, doesn't it, to what we were just saying, that to a company with the reputation, the strong reputation of P&O would not take such a gamble, we would hope, without having first come up with a plan. And maybe that plan, so for example, for some employment law claims, you need to qualify as an employee. So most people who perform work for others are workers, but for some employment law claims, such as unfair dismissal, you need to qualify as an employee. So maybe they looked at it and thought, maybe we can get away with saying that they're not employees. Maybe we can say, perhaps because they're owned by DP World in Dubai, maybe we can say that UK employment law doesn't apply. I don't think they'd succeed, but maybe they've got a plan. Maybe because there's a convention which treats seafarers separately. Maybe they thought, oh well, if we say they're not employees but they're seafarers, so again UK employment law doesn't apply. So maybe they've got that plan. We've already discussed that maybe they thought, well, we can say to the workers, actually, we're doing you a big favor here because we're giving you something, and if we'd gone under, you'd have got nothing. But as I said, for the reasons that I mentioned earlier, it just seems, I don't know, that there doesn't seem to be something quite right. You'd normally hear about problems for a while before it comes to the crunch, and so, but who knows? As we agreed at the start, it's difficult to know the truth.
So I'm just sharing this story from the BBC in the last couple of hours on the 22nd of March. This dropped. How surprised or unsurprised were you that this story dropped with new P&O crew on less than £2 an hour, according to the RMT union, that's the Rail, Maritime and Transport Union. £1.81 Indian agency workers been hired to replace P&O ferry crews in Dover, and that is a union claim. So P&O said the figure was inaccurate, but said it could not comment on how much agencies pay workers on their ferries. Some of P&O's ferries are registered in Cyprus, meaning they do not have to pay the minimum wage required by UK law. Surprising, Jonathan, or is it all part of what we would think that this journey is expected to play out?
Well, I suppose it depends on our level of cynicism, doesn't it? But I think a fair few people would not be hugely surprised by that depressing turn of events. It actually brings about another. I mean, there's so many offshoots here. So we've already discussed, are UK workers sufficiently strongly protected? Another thing here. So what's quite unusual here. Other companies, which I shan't name, have recently, quite a few of them, have gone down what's called the fire and rehire route. So they've said, right, we're sacking you, but hey, we'll re-employ you if only you're prepared to understand that we're struggling financially and you're prepared to accept worse terms than you were on originally. And there was speculation as to whether P&O would do likewise, but actually, rather than rehire, they've hired from elsewhere. On presumably, they took the view that no one would be rehired on the kind of cuts we have in mind, but there will be some people in the world who are incredibly grateful to get anything that we're offering, and so it looks like they've gone down that route. So yeah, from an employment law perspective, it's just fascinating because it includes so many questions that I cover with my students in the module. It makes employment law a living and real thing, and I think that makes it more interesting for the students, or I hope it does. They might tell me differently.
Well, it's down to you. Yeah, you know, you've been there and done it. You've been through these scenarios potentially before. I just want to get your opinion now on how you think this will play out. So almost a little bit of I suppose, an educated guessing game in a way. But what are your predictions for how the P&O story plays out?
Goodness, how does one predict the future? History tells us that invariably the employer will survive what appears to be fairly immoral behavior. However, I think that there's been such a strong reaction to this particular story. It will be interesting. It'll be interesting. So when people think, right, okay, I fancy a trip to France. How shall I get there? It'll be interesting if they consciously think, do you know what? P&O was so horrible in how they treated their workers that I'm actually consciously going to try to avoid using P&O. Who knows whether that will happen or not? Normally, people, in my experience, just look what's cheapest, what's best, and that won't come into it. But I think there's been such a strong backlash with this one that maybe P&O will suffer more in the long term from the financial consequences of travelers deliberately avoiding using them than any amount of compensation they have to pay to their 800 British staff. But it's with all these things, if I could predict the future, I'd be a very rich person.
Well, perfect, Jonathan. Really interesting insight into that, and it's obviously a story that is developing all the time and won't be going away anytime soon. But if we can catch up maybe in the future just to see how it's going, or if it has come to a conclusion, we can see if you were right or wrong potentially.
Yes.
But thank you, Jonathan Finn, from Aston Law School. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.